Project Sapien is a podcast meant to engage our brothers and sisters in the law enforcement and military communities in conversations we all know we need to have. All opinions you hear are our own and are protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. They in no way reflect or are meant to reflect the opinion of any specific agency, officer, or service member. Some opinions may be controversial. Listener discretion is advised.
All right, here we go. Project Sapien coming back. Season 4.
Season 4, somehow, the only time we're going to get in trouble with this assignment is if we run out of fingers. We might just have to start over again. Now we're 4, we're almost to one hand, which would make 5. This is getting dangerous. Number 1 law enforcement and military podcast is back. Thanks to our tens of thousands of listeners. We thank you for all the positive feedback from Season 3. And we are going full send into Season 4 with the speed, surprise, and violence of action. Super pumped for this one. It would not be possible without all of our partners and supporters, starting with our good friends at AAA Police Supply, our law enforcement listeners listening right now. If you need a one-stop shop for supplies and duty gear, you need to look no further than AAAPoliceSupply.com. That's AAAPoliceSupply.com and use that code hybrid10 for 10% off every single order you make. We also want to thank our friends at the Havoc Journal, the voice of the veteran community, focusing on current events and affairs of articles of interest to the public in general, but really the veteran community specifically. For independent news that gets the facts on everything from geopolitics, science and tech, finance to contemporary arts, affairs, and even entertainment, head over to havocjournal.com and check out our partners there at the Profiles in Havoc podcast as well. We also want to thank our friends at the Second Mission Foundation for educating, elevating, and advocating for our service community, helping them find their second mission after government service. Head over to secondmissionfoundation.org for more information on what you can do to help them support all of our service members. We also want to thank our friends at 22 Mohawks, combating veteran suicide by providing the assistance to veterans that they need, helping navigate that reentry into the civilian world when they return home from duty. And to learn more about what they've got going on, head to 22mohawks.com. And finally, I want to thank our good friend Kyle Lamb and his company Viking Tactics, the best tactical gear anywhere. From battle belts to slings and everything in between, Kyle's company offers an elite selection of high-quality, battle-proven tactical gear guaranteed to be ready for you when you need it every single time the job calls for it. Check them out at vikingtactics.com. And totally as an aside, I want to say that new EDC battle belt that he came out with, that thing's fucking sick. I've got one on order. I am super pumped to give that thing a run. He's got crazy good gear, not just for out in the field, but also for plainclothes stuff too. So if you're looking for all that new hot kit, Viking Tactics, that's the place to be. But yeah, man, hey, for season 4, we're off and running here with a fully loaded episode, pun intended.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Just real quick on Kyle, he's actually out in Normandy doing the 80th jump for D-Day. So, good luck to him and all the paratroopers out there that flew out there. I've got a few buddies of mine that are doing the 80th anniversary jump for D-Day. So you guys all have fun, and I know you guys will represent the greatest generation on Earth really well. So, yeah.
It's going to be super cool when they get that done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, so Season 4 decided to call it Speed, Surprise, Violence of Action because it just sounds cool. But no, really, it actually ties into a lot of what we're going to talk about this season, and one of them being physical fitness and how that correlates to mental fitness as well for resilience and resilience in the field. And no better to talk about that than my good buddy Chuck Ritter. And for those of you who know Chuck Ritter, know what he's been through, and he's going to be on his, I believe, 34th surgery, Chuck?
32nd.
32nd.
Well,
Okay.
32nd since 2008. There's been like hernia repairs and stuff, but I just count one of my numbers. It's combat-related injuries.
Gotcha.
Well,
Chuck, thanks for coming back, man. It was first when we first had you on the show, it was awesome, and me and you can obviously continually talk and talk about. We talked about the last podcast, one of the last episodes of season 3, and you were talking. You were, I think you said you were in the sauna, naked or something, and you were listening to the podcast on Jake's article from Havoc Journal about fitness and the snake oil that's out there, and how overall the importance of it, and so we'll kind of kick off talking about snake oil stuff that is out there, and in, you know, from your perspective and what you've seen even in the military community with that sort of selling this idea or these ideas of diets and fads and whatever else, and, you know, how you feel, how have you seen that overall?
Yeah, the good old snake oil, right? All these influencers and all these companies, they're very good at what they do, right? Like you guys talk about in your podcast about all this, you know, they know what they're doing, and they're gonna capitalize on younger males, specifically those in the military who are looking for the secrets to success. Because we were all there. I promise you, when we were all younger in our 20s, we wanted the secret to success, right? We wanted all that good stuff. Hey, I buy this product and I take it. For me, I remember taking Myoplex, and Myoplex is going to change my life. And it's a good protein product, right? But it's not going to change your life. Probably way overpriced for what you're getting. Whatever it is, like, oh, you do this workout program and you're going to be X, Y, and Z, right? But the reality is there's absolutely zero secrets to success or secrets to being physically or mentally fit. You know, there's different methods, but you're going to go out and pay whatever. Like, oh, just pay this little price of $30 a month for this, and you get X, Y, Z. It's ridiculous, right? Whether it's a pill, it's a supplement, it's the next greatest thing. You pay, you know, $240 for this. You take it for 2 months, and you're going to lose weight, and you're going to be a badass, right? I would say even like steroids and stuff, like you guys talked about, you know, THT, like that is something that may help you, but it's not the answer to anything, really. I mean, in my opinion.
You still got to put the work in. I mean, everybody got on, and this is just aging us a little bit, but everybody got on Barry Bonds for all that, you know, Mark McGuire. They still got to hit the fucking baseball, right? You still got to do the work. You still got to put it in. So getting that misconceived notion that whatever supplement or performance enhancing drug, you know, testosterone, DECA, HGH, whatever, you still got to grind. You still got to put those hours in, and then, you know, okay, then what's your program going to be? Because if all you do is jump on the gear, you're just going to get fatter. You know, you're not going to get fitter. It doesn't help you in any capacity. You've got a unique, we'll say, chronological gift here, because you were in and active on kind of the, I would say, the main evolutionary change in fitness training in the SF community, where, you know, you're coming out of the bodybuilding side of things, where guys were just getting super yoked, super big, maybe more strongman type stuff, you know, with big power numbers, but it wasn't super functional when we started, you know, in the early 2000s, the terrain changed, right? And then you saw the CrossFit wave. And then since then you've seen the, you know, kind of the post CrossFit wave, which I'll kind of lean more in towards the functional fitness aspect, where guys, you can't really chase size because it's not super functional for size sake. It looks cool. You know, you look good in board shorts, but it's not functional, you know, in the field. And you can't really chase the CrossFit side of things as hard anymore, because quite frankly, so many guys just started getting hurt a lot, you know, overtraining, because it's fun and you get good at it. But then it's also kind of that addiction curve where it's like, hey, I want to, if one is good, 100 must be better. It's like that. What they missed in that little memo was, yeah, the pro CrossFit athletes, yeah, they're professional athletes. Like, they have all the downtime to recover. And you guys were using those methodologies for training daily, you know, while on deployment for 18 months straight. It was no big surprise guys were getting dinged up.
It's the whole thing of, well, if it's hard, it must be good. Okay, well, now you're taking away the one principle you should always follow is your plan being feasibly progressive in order to overload your body to a point to where it adapts without destroying yourself, right? And a lot of, if you're just going on, you're doing the daily CrossFit workouts, like, you don't know what that is. It's just going to be a ton of stuff. And this whole functional fitness thing, I hate when people are like, no, this is functional fitness. Well, functional fitness is relative. Like, that's relative to whatever it is that you need. Like, for me, I don't need to do a bunch of handstand push-ups and walk on my hands and do this other stuff. Like, what's functional for me is, like, this morning on my new hip, I hit my first 2 miles in under 9 minute mile, right? To me, that's functional because I'm still in the military, even though I'm getting out. Like, aerobic capacity is a functional part of what I need to be able to do. Work capacity and muscular strength endurance is the functional part, you know, of what I need. That's functional fitness for me. But when you're just going through, like, well, I'm going to do all this hard stuff, you're going to break yourself. I promise you. And maybe when you're younger, it's a little bit hard to do that. But as you get older, like, you are going to start hurting. You're going to have knee issues. You're going to have elbow issues. Everything. There's overuse, and it's a thing, and everybody's going to hit it if you're overusing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing you hit. I think you hit it perfect, where even you almost getting out at your age, you know, hitting sub, you know, or 9 minute 2 miles, right? I mean, that's I know guys that barely do a 10-minute mile, never mind. Or yeah, they're more like walking speed almost, or valet jog, I'll call it.
Jogging.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
I was
not
there not too long ago. My right leg's only started to work really properly in the past month. So I was jogging.
Yeah. But that's the thing though, that like you have brand new hips. You're pretty much like the $6 million man at this point. And well, for the young listeners who have no idea who the $6 million man is, you're gonna have to Google that one. But it's one of those things where I see guys like trying out for SWAT, or trying to get on this job, and they only are required to run 1.5 miles, and they barely make the standard. And majority of them fail that standard, and the standard's not that hard. It's not like, you're just supposed to do sub 6 minute, mile runs. We're not asking for Olympic athletes, but that's what it is just these fads and these crazes that have come out in the past 20 plus years have really, I think, has really hurt more people than actually helped them to understand what is necessary for them to train for a particular field of work, right? If you're going to be a firefighter, cop, military, whatever it is, like my training is centered around what I do, right? Your training is centered around what you do. Jake is the same way. He works out centered to what is going on. And it kind of went away. Back when CrossFit first came out, this 2005 is when I first heard of CrossFit. And the whole idea behind it was, all you need is a pull-up bar and some sandbags, because, you're deployed, you're in a tent, and you don't have anything else to use for PT. It was a fantastic idea, because no one really ever thought of that, because we were still in that, Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding phase of fitness, and never really thought about, you know what, this actually works. I can stay in shape with just 2 simple things that I don't need, expensive equipment to do. Now, as the CrossFit craze started up, all of a sudden it turned into, you need expensive equipment, you need this, you need that, you need this. And it got lost in translation with fitness in the military service and in the first responder world. But in the end, we push ourselves. Like you said, I don't need to do 100 deadlifts for time. That is not a good measure on what you're supposed to be doing for your job. Like, yeah, great. I even used to do that, when I was young. I was like, let's do 100 deadlifts, see what happens. You're like, yeah, you know what happened? Freaking my back is gone. Like it was totally not necessary, because it was not functional for what I'm supposed to be doing, with my job. Like, do 100 deadlifts and then go ruck after the next day. Your body's done. It's like that was totally not necessary. And that's something, Jake always talks about in his line of work, with the workouts that he designs and the programming he designs for, SWAT and special forces and the SOCOM community and the firefighters. And, Jake can talk more on that end, on why that, the 100 deadlifts is really not necessary.
And maybe it is, but you gotta work up to that, right? Like your total volume is important. Like maybe, okay, like this week I'm at 30 is total volume, and 60 and 80, because you have a specific goal in mind of why you're trying to do 100 deadlifts. But just to go in and do like, oh man, I'm gonna do this metabolic conditioning, it's 100 deadlifts for time. Like, why? Like maybe at the end you're like, okay, I've worked up to this. Now I know I can do it, and my body's adapted to it. And now I want to be able to do this and ensure like I'm not hitting lactate threshold. When I do this. That would make sense if you had a progressive format and you had a reason for it. Right? Like there's a reason, like, man, like if I don't do 100 deadlifts, like, they're gonna kill my uncle or something like that. I don't know, whatever. Right? If there's a reason for it, then cool. But if you're just randomly, it's called random acts of training. It's, it's problematic in the military in general. Like where people are like, I'm just gonna go do this thing that's cool, or it seems like it's awesome, but that's a random act of training. It may lead to a desired end state, but it probably won't, because you're random.
And I always say your results can sometimes be in spite of what you're doing, not because of, right? So yes, you get positive results out of that because you're 26 years old, you did the workout, and the positive gain on the whatever it is you're measuring against was in spite of the work that you put in, not because of it. So it was, again, to that purpose. And, let me ask you this, Chuck, because things have evolved in the last 30 years, right? And speaking specifically towards, my side of experience, which is, real world terms on the law enforcement side, but with enough, friends like you, or the third amigo Gabe and Kyle and everybody, the velocity of we'll say action has picked up rapidly. Things were slower 35, 40 years ago in the field. Now things are faster. Communications for everybody, including the bad guys, pick up. So now your engagements things pivot faster, right? Where it used to be in the law enforcement side, surround and call out. Okay, well, we don't have time for that now because in most cases, especially what I'm talking about here, like school shooter, you're not going to take the time. Your patrol officers are going to be in there in the building. Boom, we got to go, because the velocity to which engagements have evolved has gone so exponentially high that the older methodologies of training, maybe slower, more progressive, or even just, duration, kind of the cardio based type stuff where you're talking, the 100 deadlifts for time. Okay, great. That's awesome for a lactate threshold type of thing. But, from your experience and then the way things have evolved in combat in the last 2+ decades, do you see more of a shift towards, where you've got considerably more intervals because of the way that the battlefield space has changed, the way the engagements have changed, where it's like you have to be able to get up and perform, but then there's a lot of lulls and a lot of ups and a lot of downs and a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And if you're not physiologically prepared for that, did you find guys having harder times with that came in maybe with that kind of traditional mindset of either just powerlifting or just distance running, or, they got stuck in one mode?
Yeah, I would say like your straight up powerlifters or the bodybuilder types that you always see them struggle in the range, because the reality is that for us, at least in combat, I sat down with the guys from Atomic Athlete one time. We defined what it was that was critical for our needs. Of all the different attributes that you need to train for, we said that the three most important things for somebody in special operations was, one, good aerobic capacity, your body's ability to be efficient, your mitochondria being efficient at what it's doing, to be able to go for a long period of time at a decent output and not be gassed. Then instead of just strength, muscular strength, endurance, your ability to move, moderate load for a longer duration without being smoked. More important than maximal strength, because I got to put on my kit for combat's around 95 pounds. If I'm out for 2 or 3 or 4 days, I got to be able to move that, and I got to be able to lift. I got to be able to lift other people. I got to be able to move litters. For maybe not maximal load, but maybe 225 pounds. And then the third one we said was work capacity, both acute and chronic, really, not just talking about lactate threshold, which is the acute part, but the chronic thing. And I do something hard today and be able to recover enough so I can do something hard tomorrow and the next day. And it's not destroying me. And that comes to, also being a little bit resilient and not overdoing your training, but ensuring that you're training everything properly, your joints and your core stability is not just I'm training a 6-pack, but I'm actually stable. My body's set to where I've done anti-rotational exercises and my spine is stable and it's not going to flex, and I understand where my body is in space and time, proprioception. We found that is the most important thing for us. And within there too, some of your speed stuff, but like when you got a bunch of kid on, you're going to be slow. So you do want to train, you want to train work capacity for sure. And you want to ensure that your lactate threshold is as healthy as possible. But for us, it's not like I'm not working on maximal speed and sprints, right? I'm working on my ability to be able to just really survive an engagement and be able to make decisions under stress, and for my body not to be overloaded physically, but also not being overloaded mentally, right? Because you said, like what you said, everything's getting faster. So your cognitive load is extremely high because there's so much information coming in now with all the stuff that you got to be able to be physically fit, but you also have to be mentally capable of processing all that and not hitting high stress levels to where you can still make decisions when you're tired, when there's a lot of stuff going on. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but I think that covered most of it from my perspective. I could be wrong. I'm always open to being wrong.
but that's so, just a couple points that just made me think about, Chuck, is, the other night while working mids, just we watched this body cam video of this foot chase. It was like, man, 100 yard, 150 yards, or whatever. And question came up, said, hey, I mean, what's more important really is it that the chase itself or the end result of that chase after you get the guy down? Where should you have more gas in the tank in order to be able to think through the situation as you tackle the guy, all that stuff? Do you have enough in the tank to finish the arrest, to finish what needs to happen? And, I brought up a question, said, well, how many of you train with your play carriers? Because a couple of them are like, oh yeah, I know I could, run and grab them, whatever. I'm like, yeah, that's good without anything on, without your belt, without your gun belt, without anything, without your play carrier, all that good stuff. Yeah, that's good. But now add all those things, add that additional 25 pounds to you. Do you train that way? And, obviously crickets, right? Because no one really thinks of it. I said, well, hey, listen, this is the job that we do, right? This is the thing that we do. If you're not training with your plates, if you're not training with the equipment that you are carrying, then you're already at a loss. Already, because you're not mentally prepared for that. You're not mentally prepared for that exhaustion that's going to hit you, during that foot chase, and even, cognitive overload. Our cruisers, in policing have all kinds of shit in them now for technology. You hear bells, whistles, dings, freaking all kinds of stuff, tones from dispatch if there's a hot call and everything. So you're already getting lots of input from all kinds of spots when you're on your way to a hot call, like, shots fired or whatever. And like you said, you're taking all this information in. But what's happening to you now? Are you getting stressed out where to the point that you're not going to be able to make a certain decision once you get to that location, or are you, not fit enough mentally because you don't really, take that time to work out and check yourself here and there? Are you able to make those decisions, in a kind of, not allowing that cognitive overload to really hit you that hard? I mean, we've talked before where, one of the times you got wounded, Chuck, is, in your mind, you said, hey, we still got a mission to finish. We still got to finish this mission. We're not done yet, and in your mind, and that resiliency in you, got you through to finish the mission. Right. And even then, I mean, that if no one has seen that YouTube channel, or that YouTube video of you, people should really check it out, because you were still trying to deciding what's the next move. What are we going to do? I mean, yeah, you mentioned that there's a round in your shoulder that you can feel it, but at the same time, you were still kind of, hey, we still got a job to do. We still got stuff we got going on. And I mean, for you, Chuck, this question for you is, do you put that as, because of the way you trained, because of the way you've conditioned your mind, that you're able to just kind of just switch that side, not to get that cognitive overload to the point where now you're frozen in that moment? Is that from your training that you do?
I think it's a way that we started to train. It wasn't always, a lot of people like to separate mental and physical training. It's obviously your body's your body, right? Your mind drives the body, but without your brain telling it what to do, it's not, right? Everything's like, the autonomic nervous system is not pseudoscience. It's what it is, and it has physiological effects when, one part's engaged or not. And you can train yourself to manipulate that, right? Especially if you look at your heart rate variability, you understand what it is, and understand what physiological responses are going to happen in certain things. So if you're trained properly, you're training yourself to a point of failure mentally and physically. And real quick, just because we're talking about lactate threshold, a lot of people think that lactic acid is the enemy, and it's really what the enemy is lactate in your body. That's what we're talking about, work capacity. So training yourself to a point physically, like if you ever get to a point to where you start feeling a little bit sick and your body's forcing you to shut down, that's when you've hit lactate threshold. Your body is not efficient enough anymore to keep going because there's too much lactate in your blood. And the more you train, the harder when you're doing your metabolic conditioning, one of your sprints, like intervals, that's teaching your body to be more efficient and not be, you won't shut down at that point. The same thing mentally, though, like as you start shutting down physically, people like to shut out mentally. Like you see people rowing or they'll be doing hard sprints and they're trying to go to a different place. Like, don't do that. Tune into what's going on so you can be aware and start training yourself. When you are physically at your limits and you want to quit, you also need to be mentally awake to where you're looking around. This is like for us, we have sports psych. So they'll come in, you're doing row sprints, you're doing something hard. And he's like, okay, look at this map. Okay, look at this for the whole 30 seconds you're rowing. Okay, now you're gonna do something else. Now, okay, here's another thing. Show me the route that I just showed you on there, right? So you're physically training or you're mentally training yourself to be in a shit situation and your brain is active. And if you can do that, and you got to be okay with failure too, because you're going to hit failure. You should, because failure and defeat are two separate things. Work your way past that failure, be okay with it, learn from it, and then embrace it. Like embrace training to failure and past failure, so you can work past your current capacity level, both mentally and physically. But I think that if you can start training differently, like when I was listening to the podcast the other day, we're talking about the one where you guys are talking about physical fitness. I was out there working out, and the whole point of when I listen to podcasts and I'm working out is I'm trying to train myself. Like I want to be able to be physically tired and also be able to pay attention to something. That's really the only reason I listen to podcasts when I'm working out, is because I want to make sure that I'm mentally awake and I'm not zoning out. I just thought that was an interesting podcast to listen to while I was out there doing some deadlifts and a bunch of other shitty stuff to get my heart rate up. But anyway, find a way to train yourself to do that. But it's not, everybody likes to separate. It's not separate. You gotta somehow find a way to train yourself to where you can always be mentally alert while you're also physically incredibly tired, if that makes sense. And
it absolutely makes sense. And it's funny because, people ask a lot, I've been doing program design for a really long time, and I tend to just lean into this area. General fitness is, honestly, to be blunt, pretty fucking easy. People just get the fuck off the couch and move, right? Eat less calories than you fucking burn, so consume less than you're burning. You'll be fine, right? I mean, you can get fit, sit on an air bike. You can get fit just doing burpees. Like you can get in really good shape just by moving more than being sedentary. It's not overly complicated. What I get more interested in is where it's like, okay, I have to apply my physiological condition to, in this case specifically, survival, right? In combat. In law enforcement, it's a combination of survival at times, but also just kinesthetic and cognitive awareness, so that I can respond to an emergency and not be a fucking liability, because different rules set different expectations as well. So to your point of, which I find it's funny, people give me shit a lot because I compartmentalize everything in the sense of like, I turn everything into an interval. If it's going to be a 5K, well, it's not a 5K, it's 10 500s, right? Or it's 5 1Ks or split times or whatever. And I just chew up everything and turn everything into an interval in my head, because I'm constantly on that. It sucks. I feel like shit. You talk about the kind of quasi nausea afterwards, or getting thrown up, or for me, it's usually, I know I've hit that when I start tasting metal in my mouth, right? Because your alveoli are overly expressing, and you're just like, oh, I can taste pennies, and it's something that a lot of people just won't push themselves to because they're not comfortable there, or they've never experienced it, so they're afraid of it. And it's like, hey, one, you're not going to die. More likely than not. If you do, well, we got AEDs for that, but you're not going to die. And the nice thing is it's repeatable. And now that you've been there once, you can get there again. And to your point of staying cognitively aware of where you're at in that training, I love all the I'm going to call it hyperbole, and I'm shitting on the influencers for this, get in the pain cave and block it out and do this and do that. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Awesome. Let me know how that goes in a gunfight. Let me know how that goes in any kind of scenario where you got to go hands on with somebody. Now you're just, responding and reacting. You're not actually thinking. You're going to get fucking smoked. You are going to get smoked. And I can't even imagine the number of times you've seen it firsthand where somebody just hits that red line and it's shut off time, right? And the consequences for that in your world are the most extreme of all the extremes. And that's where I like to start from and work backwards from, because if that's the 1/1,000,000th of 1% of our top performing, and I'm going to call, in not a facetious term, tactical athletes, if those are our top performers and those are the stakes, working backwards from there is where I want to go, right? I want to work back from that end state of who is a highly functional operator in these environments. What are they doing that's making them better than everybody else? And to your point is right. You're listening to podcasts to absorb information while you're pushing yourself in that physical nature, because you've practiced that, you've learned it. And the even just the basic stuff like the lactic threshold, there's a little bit of, hey, if you're in the saddle and in the game long enough, you're rewarded for it. If you look at, again, take it to the other end of the spectrum, your ultra marathoners and your ultra distance runners and guys like Cam Hanes was a perfect example. For better or worse, people love him, hate him, but Goggins, the reason that they're able to compete against much younger guys is because they've had more time in the saddle to build that lactic threshold, which you cannot do without the reps and the miles. So a guy who's 37 years old, more likely that if you gave me money to bet on a 21-year-old or a 36-year-old in an ultra marathon, and I know, that neither of them are amateurs, I'm going to lean towards the older guy because he's got 15 more years of lactic threshold built into him, right? He's got the experience and the strategy to be able to know how to manage those energy systems, stay cognitively in it, not make a mistake coming out too hot, not try to, chase some rabbit that they can't see. And those are the ways I've always worked programming around is, okay, give me those 1% where is it going to apply to literally 99 point whatever percent of the rest of us? No, because we're not going out and doing that in a day. But if it works for you in that environment, it has to work for the general populace or the, even on the civilian law enforcement side. There's no arguing around that. So it's great to hear that, specifically from you, but also knowing that your entire group has been on that wavelength, that mindset. Cause I've seen you guys, when the training facility got updated out there, I got some pictures and some photos and some videos of it. I was like, this is exactly what it needs to be. I mean, everything is geared towards that end state, which I think is just fucking fantastic.
Yeah. It's all about being mindful when you're training, because if you're just out there and you're being mindless, like, okay, I'm gonna go do some squats or some deadlifts, I'm just gonna put these headphones in, listen to music and zone out. Like, now you're literally just wasting an hour. Yeah, you're working your body, but you could be working everything. You could be training everything to adapt to get better if you wanted to, right? I think that we waste a lot of time in life just being mindless and zoning out when we should be zoning in. For example, we're talking about getting to that place where you're kind of comfortable, you're not uncomfortable. There's the phrase difficult but doable, right? So this morning on my run, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep my heart between 155 and 165 because that's a zone where I want to be more comfortable and where I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. And I don't wear headphones on those runs because when I get to the point to where I'm wanting to slow down and I look, and you can see when you're sandbagging, like, oh shit, like my heart rate's dropping, but I feel like I'm tired, but I'm not tired. So now I'm going to get back into the zone and I'm going to start thinking about something like some math. I've got a couple different algorithms that I run through, and it's kind of like punching myself for sandbagging to where I'm back up in that zone and I'm just comfortable being there, even though it's not a pace that's going to bring me to lactic threshold, but it's also a pace to where I'm like, oh, this kind of sucks, right? I'd rather be below this. And I think that's just, if you do that in your training too, I think that's very beneficial, but also it takes mental energy, and people like to do that, like to go, and we like to be mentally lazy because as humans, we're naturally lazy. It's just, we like to be efficient, and I don't know, I just feel like it's wasted time. And, like when I'm listening to a podcast, I'm making sure that I'm tuned in, like I'm trying to listen. And that way, when I get done my work, I'll go back and like actually try to remember everything and make sure that I wasn't being that mindless zombie, so to say.
Yeah. And it's funny, like guys think, again, I'm crazy guy playing chess during my workouts, right? There's a reason why I'm doing that, playing against the computer and all that. And, just the methodology and talking to these the younger generation of cops or warfighters is, the end state or the outcome of the training. Like every training that I do or lesson plan or whatever, there's always an outcome, right? There's always an outcome on why I'm doing a certain type of training, right? So going back to when we talked about the 100 deadlifts, right? If I'm working up to that, yeah, I'm working up to that because there's a reason behind me doing that. Versus if it's a WOD, workout of the day, out of nowhere, and you're like, 100 deadlifts for time. Hell yeah, let's go do that. No, that's not something that I'm interested in, especially these days. And it's funny, just with Jake talking about, the Iron Man, the 36-year-old and the 21-year-old, you should see like on our SWAT team, we have the more seasoned guys on the team, and we do this team run every year. And it's up this Blue Hill Mountain, which is more of a hill, but we'll call it Blue Hill Mountain, Massachusetts. And it's funny to see the younger guys get smoked out before us because we know our bodies, because we're tuned into our bodies. We know, when to push the gas, when to kind of ease up on the gas, and to get us to last all the way to the top of that hill. And it's funny to see the shift in perspective in the younger guys when they start seeing us older 40-year-olds, beating them on this race up the hill, and, not even really being as winded as they are, because we're leaving them in the dust, sort of, where they're trying to keep up with us. And it's all about, like we said, like you said, the mindset, right? Of being in tune to your body versus ignoring everything. Yeah, I'm going to go to my happy place, quote unquote, right? And just keep pushing. Well, you go to your happy place, guess what? You're not paying attention to what's going on around you. That situational awareness of what's going on when I'm, and it dictates right back to missions, right? Missions or even patrol. If I'm in my happy place, not thinking about patrol, I'm ignoring all the threats that are in front of me because I'm in my happy place, just going whatever. And that's, I think, complacency really sets in. Is you get lazy, you get complacent, and you just forget why you're there. Working out, mentally working out, physically working out, to me, it's like you said earlier, Chuck, it's one and the same. Just because you're physically working out doesn't mean you're not mentally working out. You're also mentally working out, right? You're juggling all kinds of things going on in your head when you're actually focused. I mean, one of the best things that I did was do some powerlifting, throughout my life. And one of the things powerlifting taught me is to be in tune with every movement I'm doing. I mean, from my toes up to my head, where every muscle needs to be activated in some sort of way. And you had to concentrate on that movement, because if you put on your headphones and go to deadlift 500 pounds without thinking because you want to go to your happy place, guess what? You just killed yourself. You seriously hurt yourself. Where, with powerlifting, it forced me to recognize years ago that, mind-body connection is a real thing. Where you need to feel your lats engage. You need to feel your quads, your calves, everything engage when you're about to do that heavy deadlift. And, with Jake's programming, all the time, he talks about that, where, when you're doing a certain movement, you got to make sure you're feeling this, that, or the other. That way you're paying attention to those things. And even with shooting, right? Today, actually, at SWAT school, I spoke a little bit about that, not just shooting, but all, movements, entries, and everything. And, I told them, at one point we were pieing a room, right? And I gave them kind of the cue of, hey, make sure you're clearing your 5 and 25. Military guys, we all know what's the 5 and 25, right? We clear the 5 and 25 all the time. And that's the thing. It's like, that in comp world, that's, clearing your primary and secondary, right? So even with those types of movements, even then your head needs to be in the game without, that, because it's dangerous work, right? It's real work that if you're not on it, if you're not mindful, if you're not cognitively there, your teammate's going to get hurt as a result. Not so much you, right? Yeah, you're going to get hurt. But for me, the biggest fear in any operators out there in the world is failing your teammate that's going in that room with you. And that's the thing that drives all of us, essentially, with our workouts, with our mental fitness and everything, is because we need to be that tip of the spear as much as we can be when we're out there doing the real work. So, I mean, that's kind of the way I see it all the time. And that's the way kind of the mindset I've had for a really long time, especially after coming back from war and experiencing what I've experienced.
Yeah, I think that for anybody, even if you're not in law enforcement, if you're just, you're talking about general fitness, like you need to have a reason for what you're doing. Like, what are you training for? Like, that comes back to what we talked on the phone is, a lot of people train for preference versus necessity, but in order to have necessity, you got to define what that is. So, if you're on like a tactical team, it's going to be different than being like a guy that's doing like beat work and stuff like that. But really, like, what is the necessity? And I'll give an example of this. For special forces selection, what the answers to the test are for the initial physical fitness test you're going to take. They're going to test you on pull-ups. They work testing setups. So I'll go with the old test. It was pull-ups. How many pull-ups you're going to do, sit-ups, push-ups, and a run. That's right in the gate. But you know what the standard is. So we were finding that a lot of people were showing up and not passing sit-ups. right? And then they took the sit-ups out because they were failing too many people. But it's like, why did we do that? Like, do you want somebody that understands what the test is going to be and they're going to show up and fail it anyway? Like, maybe you don't like doing sit-ups. Guess what? It doesn't fucking matter. That's what the requirement is. Like, maybe you don't like to run. It doesn't matter. It's the requirement for being in the Army. It doesn't matter that you prefer not to run. For the Army Combat Physical Fitness Test, you got to run. You got to run after you've done a bunch of other hard stuff. So it doesn't matter if you like to do it. So instead of training for the preference piece, train for what's necessary first, which for us right now, I got to throw a ball, I got to do planks, I got to do a deadlift, I got to do hand release push-ups, I got to do a sled drag carry, and I got to run 2 miles. I don't have to like any of that shit. It doesn't matter. My opinion and what I feel doesn't matter. The reality is, whether I agree with the test or not, that is a standard. I need to be good at that first, and I should be excellent at it, because we should all strive for excellence. And then when I'm good at that, I can do whatever I want to, right? And I can do, like, every morning I wake up, I do 320 seconds of plank or more, generally more, because that's what I got to do to max the plank. I don't like doing that shit. I hate it, but I do it because I'm about to get another hip surgery, get my left hip replaced. I want to take an ACFT and score a 580 or above before I get out of the military. My final update on 1 February. I took an ACFT 3 days before my last hip surgery, my hip replacement. I got a 544 on it. I was very disappointed. I maxed most things. The run killed me at the end. I just couldn't get my hips to work. So for me, mentally, I know that I want to do that. So I train towards what my personal necessity is. I know I'm probably not going to go back to combat my condition, but for me, mentally, that's the necessity, right? So I focus my training towards that.
Well, and expanding on that a little bit more too, because you're touching on something that, if everyone's lucky enough, they're going to be an old guy, sit in this chair on a podcast 10, 15, 20 years down the road with gray hair like you, or no hair like the rest of us, right? If they're lucky enough to have that opportunity to get through a career that long, right? That is not going to come without mileage and damage. And I mean, rest in peace. But one of my favorite lines from a Toby Keith song is, I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. And, I know for you, and I'm sure, Iman, who's the young buck in this room, but even guys like Kyle and Gabe, and I don't have any doubt that for, one day, one job, one mission, we can be there. Right. And that's the difference, is that, yes, we can turn that on and we can hit that switch and go. The repetitiveness is where the young guys have the advantage, because the recovery, just naturally being younger, less mileage, is so much better than what we've got, because they don't have the mileage, they don't have the damage, they're not walking around on, you're soon to be artificial hips all around, but they don't have osteochondritic arthritis in their hips, they don't have a total knee, they don't have shoulders that need to be replaced. They can repeat the business over and over and over again. The big goal that I have for talking with younger guys in particular, that are coming in now, to a guy that would be on, brand new to your team, he might be in his early 20s. We know enough now, training wise, that guy should be able to get to our age with a considerable amount less damage overall, because of the training, right? Because we train smarter. We know how to, it's not just train until you break it like it used to be. And that's where you have that unique position of, coming up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and the different evolutions of training. Our training side was so far behind the curve of what the world was saying we had to apply in the field. And now, because of, and in large part of these fucking things, these phones, we have so much more information available and so much quicker sharing of access to information for, hey, this works, this doesn't, this is shit, this is great, that we can choose to be much, much smarter in our training. I say that because it's a choice, because we're all old and broken with fake body parts. But for you, seeing the young bucks coming in, I know from the guys that I've talked to, there is still that mentality of if hard is good, harder's mo better, even though it's not the smartest thing to do. And we still have that. We still have to fight that intrinsic nature of giving it far too many reps, or far too, breaking ourselves down, because we're lazy in the sense that, at 23, 24 years old, we can recover faster. That mileage still adds up. You only get 500,000 miles on that chassis. How you choose to use it is up to you. And if you're not being smart about your training at 20, 25, 30, you're going to be fucked by the time you try to get to 50, and let alone, here you are, you're going to pass that test, on fucking fake hips. And a lot of those guys, because they can go so hard out of the gate now, they're not going to make it, you know, if they have that mentality. Can you talk on that a little bit? Just that mindset shift of understanding, or where it was you came to understand better that you have to actually pay attention to recovery. You have to pay attention to structure of training. Because I know it wasn't early in the early 20s. So we were all dumb as shit. Just lift more heavy, more. And then things start to break down. You know, where did that pivot happen for you?
That all comes down to education. I think we're all young and dumb at some point. And I think that for example, if you just pick up the Army's field manual right now on physical and mental fitness, it's pretty badass. It actually has everything in there you need to know about how your body adapts to avoid overtraining. But, you know, it takes you picking it up and reading it as a soldier, or even if I think you can download it for law enforcement. It's actually a very good manual, covers a lot of stuff. If you have a basic understanding of the adaptations your body's making and for what it is, like physiologically, your body actually doesn't care if you're running or you're rowing to make an adaptation to those energy systems. Obviously, if you want to run fast, you need to go run. But I think once you understand that you don't need to go hard all the time to make certain adaptations, that's very beneficial. And then how much recovery you need when you do go hard is incredibly important. So I think for us, once we got our physical trainers around 2010, 2011 was the shift for us. And the biggest thing that having trainers and sports psychs and physical therapists did for us is it stopped us from being complete dumbasses. For example, when I got blown up in 2008, it took 4 years to rebuild my face, and you know, it's one of the reasons why my hips are dead, and you know, a bunch of broken ribs, and they were rebuilding my jaw, so I didn't have front teeth for a while. So I think it was like 2009. I had a bone graft, and they were rebuilding this. And so they took all 4 wisdom teeth, they did a bone graft, and I called my buddy up. I was like, hey, man, let's go do a 12-mile ruck. And he's like, are you sure you want to do that? Absolutely. So there we are, like halfway through. He looks over, I'm like completely white. My face is like melting. And ever since that, I've been able to see my pulse in my left eye, and I like messed up one of the screws because of my blood pressure. I probably would have recovered twice as fast if we would have had trainers and people to keep us from being dumbasses, right? And I think with the education we have now, we can kind of take this step back and realize, like, going hard all the time isn't necessarily better. It's like, what adaptation am I trying to make with my body? And let me train for that. So maybe for what I'm trying to do, okay, I do need to increase my endurance and my mitochondrial density and efficiency. So what I'm going to do is these slower, longer runs intermixed with some intervals, but really I want to be able to go much further at a distance to where I want to be able to get to where, hey man, I can hold a 10-minute mile at a 145 heart rate for 2 hours or whatever that is, right? Because X, Y, and Z, whatever your goal might be. But maybe that changes up your algorithm to where, okay, I'm only doing 3 runs a week and I'm giving myself X amount of rest. And although that might not feel like I'm training hard enough, that's going to get me to where I want to get faster than just going balls to the wall. Right? Like right now for my cardio, like I did a tempo run today. Tomorrow Wednesday I'm going to do 800-meter intervals. And then Friday is a longer run. And I got some rowing in between there, but that's it. We're back in the day, I would be running or rocking every single day of the week. Like when I'm old, I can't recover as fast anymore. But I'm pretty sure if I went back in time and did the same kind of more intelligent programming, I would have seen much better gains, and I wouldn't be in some of the physical condition I'm in now. But again, you don't know what you don't know. Like in the military, it's like, hey, you're going to run 4 days a week, you're going to rock on Fridays, and then you're probably going to wake up on Saturdays and go do something stupid too. So I think it just comes that, like, we need to educate ourselves and educate others. And once you understand how the body adapts, it's not some kind of pseudoscience. It's not magic. It is what it is. All of our bodies, like, they might adapt differently. Like for me, I have to do a lot more cardio than most people to stay physically fit, but my body adapts the same damn way. Or like, I got to give it the same stimulus to get the results I want. I think that just comes down to like taking some time to educate yourself on, like, how much recovery do I need? In top of like, how do I need to feed myself? How much sleep do I need? How much time do I need in between? Like, I think Garmin's are great, right? Because it tells you right there, like, hey, dumbass, don't do anything hard for 23 more hours. And maybe that's right or wrong, but at least it's an indicator. I got the Fallout Boy on my face thing. Like when I'm being stupid, he's all in a cast and he's on a cane. So, but something where you can like, hey, am I doing this right? It goes back to the principle of there's a difference between doing the right thing and doing that thing right. So you're like, okay, man, I need to work out. and I need to be physically fit. But if I know from the military, if I just do powerlifting 5 days a week for a year, yes, I've done the right thing by doing physical fitness, but I do that thing wrong. So I'm going to fail to run and I'm not going to be where I need to be. Right. So, and that applies to everything. Like, shit, I got enough rest? Am I doing X, Y, and Z? So yes, maybe you're doing the right thing by working out, but taking a step back and educating yourself. Am I doing this thing properly to achieve my goals? And making sure you have goals. Like, what are your goals? Like, do some mission analysis. What are you trying to achieve? Like, here's my goals, because we've all the 4 Ps, like, okay, I've got some kind of purpose. I've got it planned out. I've got a plan to get there. It's feasibly progressive. I'm using some kind of periodization to get to this goal and end state. And maybe we take a step back. Like, well, shit, is my programming actually achieving the end state? Maybe it's not, right? But again, I think it's called the answer to that question is we all need to educate ourselves and keep up with what it is that the science behind the way the body works. Because again, it's not pseudoscience. It's not even rocket science. It's really not that.
Yeah. No, they're simple systems. We're exothermic engines. That's it. Fuel in, fuel out, energy in, energy out. And it's funny too. You mentioned that about, I mean, if you came to me and said, hey, I need to hit this number in this time and and I got 2 fake fucking hips I'm going to do it on. Awesome. Guess what we're not doing? We're not doing any fucking running. Guess what you are doing? You're doing a shit ton of air bike on the Echo bike, and you're doing a shit ton of ski ergs, and I'm going to save all that mileage for your run. But I am going to take your VO2 through the fucking roof, right? Because when your body gets into that state of readiness, it doesn't really matter what the mechanism of movement is. It is ready to perform movement at that pace. So if I put you in the pool, presuming you can swim, if I put you on a mountain and tell you to hike over the top of it, or I put you on a flat track and say, hey, you got to go run this, 10 miles in whatever number, whatever the time is, you're going to be able to do it because your body is capable of doing it. It's a simple machine. And I think people get really wound up in because they either want to do things that they like, so they go harder at it, or they avoid things that they don't like. But if you're more outcome derivative of, I need to hit this number for this test, I don't give a fuck about what it takes to get there, I just need to hit that number, great. Then it doesn't really matter the mechanism at which you get there, as long as you can do it, you can repeat it, and you can scale it. And that's the biggest thing that it's, when I've got guys, whether it's college athletes or law enforcement or anybody military, I know that the pounding that the body's going to take orthopedically. I am not going to be programming big, heavy weighted box jumps. Or I'm not going to be sending them on big, huge, heavy, long distance concrete based runs. Because why the fuck would I spend that mileage when I don't have to? I can put that in the piggy bank, especially for a guy, with your age and mileage. I can put that in the piggy bank. You can save that run for the back end when you actually have to do the test and build up all that capacity and speed everywhere else to when you do then have to go perform and pass the one test, right? Good once as I ever was. It's going to be there, and you're not breaking down. Because I mean, you just said it too on your last one. Your hips weren't working, so you couldn't physically. Your mind was there, right? I'd even go so far as to say that pulmonarily speaking, your heart and cardio response was there. Your transmission wasn't working. Your transmission wasn't able to distribute the force to the ground to get you to propel forward at a rate that you needed to pass the test at the number you wanted. And where does the fault lie in that? Maybe cycling back to 2009 and doing a fucking 12-mile run the day after having half of your face put back together probably wasn't the best idea, but it also probably wasn't a terminal mistake either. It's not that one straw, it's the last straw that breaks the back, right? And so it's like you've probably got 1,000 of those examples of shit like that. But when you're younger, you can absorb that kind of damage, but that shit still adds and it still weighs you down. I like that mentality though, of don't go fast just to go fast, right? It's the wider quote, right? Fast is fine, accuracy is final. Have an end state goal, have a target, have a purpose in that training. That's what you want to get to. That point, just because you're going fast doesn't mean you're doing it better. And I like that shift in mindset. I'm glad to hear that, at least with the guys around your circle and your world, that's filtering down, hopefully, as much as they can absorb it and hear it at 23, 24, 25 years old.
Some people don't hear it. Like I can remember like the trainers like, Chuck, you do more like glute ham type stuff. Like, and I was like, oh, I fucking hate doing this. This thing sucks. But like the one thing, if I go back in time, I would do a lot more of that type of work, right? I do a lot more like, just work on my posterior chain to I'd probably have less knee injury, or less knee pain, stuff like that, right? But again, it goes back to like, well, I don't want to do that because it sucks. But maybe that's what you want to do because it sucks because you suck at it.
Well, that's the thing is work again. being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? If you're, you know, and I these days, it's funny how far behind law enforcement is versus adapting and just telling people, no, this is the standard and you have to meet the standard. You know, they've actually dropped the sit-ups and now you got to do like a plank, right? And they're trying to drop the even the mile and a half run. I think they're trying to get rid of because people can't pass the run. And it's like, no, now you're turning this profession into just being a bunch of fat slobs. And, you know, I was watching JFK talk about, you know, it was just this reel of him when he started I think it was the physical fitness aspect of schools, you know, where one of the things he says is, you know, no, I think something along the lines is nobody wants a chubby kid. You know, I think he said something like that. Don't quote me 100%, but it was something like that where yeah, I was like, dude, that's awesome. You know, back then I was like, hell yeah, you know, like there's a reason why we stress upon physical fitness, you know, that and people see, to me, you know, those who fail the, let's say, mile and a half run, well, it's because you haven't actually trained it. I personally absolutely hate running. Right. The military taught me to hate running because all we did was run, you know, and I absolutely hate it. And in Jake's programming, he's right. He will destroy me on the devil's tricycle, you know, just because, right, to get that max VO2. That way, you know what, when I do my run with SWAT, I'm like, oh, cool. You know, I'm doing it. You know, I'm going and I'm running, you know, even though I loathe it. But guess what? You know, I'm doing other things and I'm training myself and I'm doing interval sprints as a result, you know, on with the runs, right? Because I hate running, but guess what? It's a necessity for the job, right? It's a necessity for the standard. So I'm not going to shy away from it because I just don't like doing that thing. Right. It's just the way it is. Same thing, like you said, with sit-ups. Well, yeah, you're failing the sit-ups because you probably don't do sit-ups.
Yeah, you can literally train. If you train for something, intelligently, you're going to get better at it, no matter what it is, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like you know, today, you know, at SWAT school, you know, we have a lot of patrol guys, and you know, they're not used to doing these types of movements and stuff. And we say, you know, listen, the difference is we train it. That's it. That's the only difference. Said you can train it when you go home, right, on your off-duty hours. You can train it. You can do it. And that's the thing is train on something that makes you uncomfortable because it goes back to your physiological and your psychological and neurological abilities where you're building that neuroplasticity, right? You're building that gas tank in you to be able to withstand whatever might come at you. And we'll just talk about just life in general. You know, we all know fucking life sucks and it hands you fucking all kinds of shit every single day. And it's you know, I always say that, you know, life is about perspective, right? And it's about choice. And I should say, it's not so much choice, but it's in the intention of what you do, right? If you do things with a certain level of intensity and intention, your end result will be your end result based on your own personal actions, right? Personal accountability. So if, you know, we have a couple brand new guys, brand new recruits at my job, and I'm sitting there watching them eating fucking like, you know, meatball subs and all that shit. And they got a PT test coming up in like 3 months and all that. And I'm like, hey, if I take you guys out there right now and we do the PT test, will you pass it? I was like, don't think, will you pass it right now? Well, no. Why not? And, you know, I point to the food that they're eating. Yeah, fucking meatball subs, chips, whatever. I'm like, right here is the issue. You know, right here. I was like, you're not even training. You're just sitting there, you know, being slobs, and you're not even prepping yourself for that PT test. And 3 months is a long time to prep, you know, and that's the thing. If you're not training for it, you're not going to be ready for it.
Yeah, it comes down to that discipline and consistency. Like we said earlier, like, you can be physically fit doing anything. Just as long as you just get up and do it, and you're consistent with it, you have the discipline to see yourself through. I mean, if you want to be really physically fit at something specific, then obviously you need to specifically do that thing because the set principle, right? Like specific adaptation to impose demands to real.
Yeah.
But again, your body also doesn't, like you're talking, like, the body doesn't care specifically what you do. It's not like, oh shit, you just ran 2 miles and that's no, like your body only cares about intensity and volume and time under stress. That's all it cares about. It doesn't matter what the input is. Like exercise is the means to an end. Like it's going to adapt physiologically. So if I'm on the Stairmaster every day and I'm doing at certain heart rates at a certain intensity, my body's going to adapt just like it would if I was running or something else. Yeah. And I need to get out and like do those motions for running to practice that specific thing, but I don't have to do it as much, right? I can do something else and get the same physiological adaptation if that's what I'm going for. Yeah. If you understand.
Well, it's totally, and you kind of hit something on the head too when you were referencing your watch, and looking at the watch, telling you, hey, dummy, you need some rest. A lot of people get hyper focused on, and I'm a data person, right? So I like feedback. If you can't track it, you can't train it, because if you can't track it, you can't adjust and then make course corrections, right? So it's just nebulous at that point. But hyper saturation of data can be a problem too, because people start to buy into the data way too much and let the data dictate what their body will do or what they should be doing, which is, oh, you're not optimally recovered, you shouldn't train today. Well, no, that's bullshit. You can still go fucking train. You can still go perform. You can still perform at an extreme level. Just know that what you're taking out of that is not that is coming out of your savings account, right? You're taking a deduction off of what you've got in your Scrooge McDuck fitness bank, right? And boy, that just aged me. Holy shit.
All I pictured was the diving off the board into the gold.
Thing, right? Yeah, it's like he always had it on hand, and then and somehow it always gets stolen and refilled. But to your point is yes, tracking that and knowing that and saying, hey, this is not an optimal day to do XYZ. That might be true, but it doesn't mean you can't go do XYZ. And I think that's something that a lot of I'm going to say the kids, but a lot of people miss. Younger guys in particular, is that they get so looped into that it's like, oh, well, if it says I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do it because I'm not capable. It's like, no, you are capable of doing it. Just understand there's a cost associated with that. And if you're not fueling properly, i.e. recovery with food or supplements, if it's appropriate, if you're not sleeping properly, if you're not hydrating, if you're not hot, cold plunge, all that shit, there's a cost, and it's coming out of that savings. And I think that's a really important thing to not miss, because you're old enough and wise enough to know that data, while it's important, you've also been in scenarios where you didn't have a choice, but you have to go run, shoot, fight, whatever. And your body was there, right? You can make it do it, but it comes at a price, and knowing where that balance sheet is super important. I got one last kind of,
hey, real quick, before you ask your question, I want to, what you said right now is interesting that you said that, because I've been in a state for about 2 weeks of being chronically overtrained, and my heart rate variability was like, hey, you're in a chronic load. And I was doing that on purpose. And I was like, okay, I can accept this. And I am taking it out of the bank, because last Friday I had a stellate ganglion block, and I knew that I'm going to do this on a Friday. And on Saturday and Sunday is going to be yoga mobility for about an hour each day. I'm going to go for a 3-mile walk each day. And I'm going to rest, and I'm going to get some good sleep. And lo and behold, it's Sunday, man, my heart rate variability was back in the green. I was feeling pretty good. And, running this morning, and my goal was to drop a minute off this run time that from this run I dropped over 2 minutes off of it, and I felt amazing afterwards, right? And I got another workout this afternoon. But I knew I could be in that condition of being overtrained because of what I had planned coming up and bringing me back into where I needed to be.
Right.
So you can do that. You gotta have a plan for it.
Right. And I know it's a little bit more nebulous if you're on deployment and you're out there, but those are also not the times you're going to be making PR gains, right? You're going to be more or less just sustaining what you took with you out in the field, and hope that you don't wear it all off before the end of your deployment. Cause it does. You guys come back, you're just worn down. You're physically just worn down. So it's like preseason for football. And then you get into season, it's like, oh, I dropped 17 pounds. Yeah. Because the beating beat it out of you. To that. And that's a perfect example, because that actually feeds my question really well. I'm not a huge yoga fan. I'm not a huge Pilates fan for me participating in it. Right. But I do understand the benefits of it. I understand what it does for recovery. I understand the same, I actually like cold plunge. I don't like necessarily steam rooms, but I understand the benefits of it. And then the practical application is, that, and maybe you're a yoga guy, you're a total yogi, maybe you're into Pilates, totally fine. But the benefit that's going to have on the back end of the practical application of going and being faster, right? And passing your run test. When you were talking about, back in the day, not wanting to work posterior chain, and I was just spent this last weekend going through kind of first phase of instructor's course, and with firearms, and I'm watching guys that, you know, very clearly have ridiculously great bench presses, you know, probably pretty good front squats, but they have no ass and they have no back, and they're struggling with some of the courses of fire with the handgun and the rifle because their structure is not benefiting them. Their structure, while it's great for, you know, certain things, there's no balance, there's no static tension, there's no decelerative capacity there to where they could do the things better, stronger, with better frame and faster, right? The speed coming on the back end because their fundamentals are so much better, because their foundation of build is better. And because, again, to the tone of our season here, when it comes to applying violence in the work capacity, whether it's hands or weapons, did you see a shift in your capabilities, and even if it's in quals or whatnot, in a measurable way? Did you see that shift in capabilities when you shifted your training?
I'm not sure if we saw it, like, because we weren't really looking for it on the range and whatnot. But what we would do is have the sports psychs come out and put heart rate monitors on us so they could track our HRV, and we would run these longer events to where you had to come into something where you use your brain smoked, and you could tell the teams that would train properly because they could get their heart rates down. They could condition themselves to think of this thing and this next thing where they got to be violent with what they're doing. They could go execute that, and they could regulate themselves and slow themselves down again for the next event where they had to be slower, right? So they could think fast and slow when they needed to. And you could tell the teams that were just doing like your traditional stuff and whatnot, they would come in, and one of the tests was you would come in, and I think it's like an hour in, you did some really, I think we just came back from doing like some crazy sled push and pulls to where you were just lactated out, and you came to this table and you opened up this Chili's coloring book, and it had 3 crowns and very detailed instructions like, hey, you will color this with these colors and the lines, and you like all this stuff, and you'll, at the end, you're going to order your kid a full meal with X, Y, and Z. Anything over 10 minutes is going to incur penalties. And like all these dudes would be over 10 minutes, right? When it would take anybody, like that was normal, like 3 minutes to do the whole thing. Right. But you could see that with the teams that would train and train appropriately with what they were doing. And again, they wouldn't be gassed at the end either. So I wouldn't say we saw it there, but if I'm going to use a real world example. So when I got shot when we talk about the helmet cam footage, we put stuff in our training all the time. Like, hey guys, we're at the range. We got a quick 30-minute lunch break, but 30 minutes after that, we're going to be doing, we're going to get these litters, and we're going to run these litters around with these fuel cans, and we're going to smoke the shit out of ourselves, and then we're going to do tourniquet training, and we're going to do all this other stuff. And I think I was just talking to our medical, the amount of medical training, the amount of thinking training, and the amount of all this other basic shit like we would do, people wouldn't even think about, like, okay, hey guys, we just did this rifle call, take a 15-minute break. I got 3 maps over here. You're going to plot these Greek coordinates, and you're going to call X, Y, Z, and then we're going to get back to whatever we're doing on the range. But when I got shot, and then all of a sudden they had to put me in the sked co, and they had to carry me through this freaking fight their way for an hour to get me to this HLZ and do all this other stuff. We were just talking about afterwards, like, man, the way we trained, we did everything was just second nature. And we added all these other training elements into what should be a fun range day, because people don't like to do all this other stuff. They don't like to do their combo training and their medical training because it's not fun and sexy. It's kind of hiding the fact, and everybody can just execute those things almost automatically. So I would say that it's not a matter of like training intelligently. We're like, okay, we got to do like X, Y, and Z in the gym. It was a matter that it was never just a gym session. If we were at the gym, okay, hey, we're going to stop and we're going to do knots here. Okay, now, hey, we're doing gym, and we've got the sports like making you think here. Okay, we're at the gym and we're doing this too, or on a run, and then we're at the range. We're just doing the exact same thing. So you're not just training. I'm not just out there doing pistol. I'm out there doing pistol, but I'm also training X, Y, Z that may be a little bit less sexy, but I'm making sure that I'm getting those reps in. And I think that's really what took us through. But I would say, like, when it comes to balance, and if you're doing bench press, make sure you're doing something over rows. If you're doing some military press, make sure you're doing pull-ups. Like, keep everything balanced. Like, you shouldn't be able to bench press 335 pounds and not be able to pick something up the other way, right? And then, okay, maybe you can bench press 335 pounds, you can deadlift 500 pounds, but can you pick your buddy up and can you run with him for a mile without being gassed out? Like shit like that. And then when you do that, can you stop and take a step back and get on the radio and make a call when you're under pressure, under stress, and still sound like you're in control and everybody's got the confidence that you know what you're doing? Or, you're not going to freak out when an acorn hits the top of your vehicle and dump a mag. for no reason. But anyway, right? Like,
oh, I love it.
I think that you can, people are kind of lame in their training sometimes. Like, okay, yeah, listen to a podcast during training. I do it sometimes, but other times, I've got other little mental drills that I'll do. But I think that's the smarter way to train to get the most out of it, and obviously training more intelligently too. Like I like doing a little bit of like some kind of sprint or something at the end of a workout, especially if it's like if it's like a big lift workout, like okay, I'm doing deadlifts or squats. Okay, I'm gonna end that with something that gets my motor going a little bit, just because I don't know. I like to keep it real and not get stale if I don't.
So it's funny.
Moving over ground's a thing. Like you got to be able to move over. I don't care what you're in. Moving over ground's important. You can be super strong, but like maybe sometimes you do got to run away, or like like whatever. You got to run towards the enemy. Like, can you do that without being gassed? Like, I think that's more important. I think strength, endurance, and aerobic capacity is like super important. People don't like to do it because it sucks.
So just a couple points. So this weekend working, you were talking about, can you talk on the radio without, sounding gassed or screaming into the radio in a panic state? We have, one of the brand new officers who's on field training, and they just finished from a call. I think it was some sort of disturbance or whatever. And the way he came over the radio, everyone thought that he just got punched or shot or something. Right. And he was just clearing the call, like, all right, we're all set type of thing. We're leaving. And you should see the group text message. Like, what the fuck? Like, dude, we just thought you got shot, whatever. And I told his field training officer, I said, hey, can you unfuck that, please? to scream like that meant that to everybody else, that's something bad just went down. And, the kid clearly, I mean, he understood right away, like, hey, do not have that panic in your voice. And the other thing was, I dealt with a mass casualty type event at work. And one of the things that the junior officers mentioned to me on a phone call, like a couple of days later, they were saying how calm and cool, like, they're like, dude, you couldn't even tell that you were in a mass casualty situation. It was just so smooth. And I said, well, that's just, experience and mileage, right? Learning how to know physiologically where I'm at and mentally and what I got going on. And if I'm yelling into the radio, what good is that going to do for everybody else coming to help me out? Where I got multiple injured, I need to triage, I need to do this, I need to do that, right? As the fire department's getting there, they're listening, right? They're getting that situational awareness of what's going on as they're getting on scene, and they can do what they got to do. Now, if I wasn't training the way I train, and if I wasn't paying attention to myself, right, internally and externally, yeah, I'm probably going to be yelling into the radio like a madman. I got 5 injured. I need this. I need, like a madman, diarrhea of the mouth. And that I learned, way back at war, with IED strikes and all that. And, you can almost like can clearly hear people on the SINGARs, on the radios, when they're calling it in, especially the more seasoned guys, the guys with experience in combat, and they're very clear. And at the time I was like 22 years old, young, not even actually 21, and I was like, wow, that that individual is so quiet, so yeah, intense situation. Clearly, you can tell by the voice inflection as well. But they were very clear in their intention. They were very clear in what they needed out in the field when that IED strike happened, or when I was, flipping punching in the different numbers for calling in air support and stuff like that, where it just turned automatic, and it was almost like I don't know if you describe it like a out of body type experience, where you're just like. Your body just goes, man. It just does the job, and you're just like, cool. I'm just sitting in the back seat and paying attention to everything else. So that just those two couple points that just kind of reminded me when you talked about yelling into the radio and all that.
Like that simple thing. Everybody assume I assume that I can do this. Don't assume you can do it. Like even the simplest thing under stress could be overwhelming if you're not trained on it. I mean, I told you the story about how you've been wiping your own ass is perishable.
Yeah.
Everything's perishable, but it's not just perishable. everything becomes, astronomically more difficult when you're in a position of stress. So, we talk about stress inoculation, but a lot of times it's as simple as like, test yourself. Like, don't assume you can do it. Test yourself. Like, test yourself. Like, it's just like the beginning of programming. Like, oh, these are my goals. Let me test this shit. Let's do the programming. Let me test myself at the end. And maybe you don't do so well on the test. Who cares? Like, be okay with that. Be okay with sucking at some things so you can get better at it. Make sure you identify what you suck at. Maybe talking on the radio under stress is something you have difficulty with. Practice it, right? Simple shit, tourniquets, being on the radio, like getting to your equipment, like, shit, let me go do this really hard thing and make sure I can get to all my equipment and I can use it, right? Like, I can do all this thing and I can still work my GPS. I can do all this stuff. I can still work my medical stuff. I can do all this. I can still work my radio. I can do all this, and I can whatever the hell it is that you think is simple. Maybe it's not that simple when you're in a place where you're really stressed out and people are trying to kill you, right? Because that changes the game.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for jumping back on with us after my technical malfunction there. I really appreciate you getting enough time back to do that. I did space on a pretty important question, circling back to the earlier part of our conversation that I definitely wanted to include before we wrap. We talked about training and specifically, these kind of fitness influencers and online trainers who tout all their work that they've done training special forces personnel, and they'll show off these certificates of appreciation and patches and, all the stuff that they've been given by the various groups and peoples that they did the event with, but they use language like, I trained special forces operators, or I trained so-and-so. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only actual trainers and coaches that are truly working with SF and Army personnel are, your official full-time, either Army or DoD staff or contractors under long-term contracts, correct?
That is correct. We do have a pretty robust staff of physical trainers, therapists, sports psychologists, dietitians, but they are all very specific to us, and they all have to have worked with a professional sports team in the past, and they're heavily vetted, and they're not influencers. And the influencer question is interesting because I know I'm in, he tells people, he's like, I'm a police influencer. And that's kind of, but oddly enough, the Army actually does, the Army marketing team at, Big Army, they have an agreement with all these different influencers. And sometimes we bring them out to Special Forces selection for some things that they've done. But it's kind of like this quid pro quo thing where like, hey, you come and run and do this stuff. And then you can also use this verbiage like selling yourself, like, oh, I did this with the Army, I helped train them. So the Army does bring them in and they use them, and then they know that they use the Army to sell themselves. So I'm not completely 100% sold on it. I see why they do it, but sometimes it comes across as a little bit cheesy, and it's probably not. The comments you see is like, oh, that's not real. That's just all made up. So yeah. So no, they do put that on there. But none of these influencers actually train us. Even with the human performance teams down at the brigades and the military outside of special operations, all the same thing. Those are professionals that are school trained in their specific field, and they come in and they provide that expertise to the force.
That's kind of, having been inside and outside a little bit, that's what I've seen, but I know that that's not what's necessarily presented, out in the public, which is kind of tough because then, the public only knows what they know. Right. And so people get pissy about it. And I hear guys complain about it. It's like, well, but then if nobody else is going to say anything, how's the general public supposed to know? But the influencers aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily misrepresenting that they were there, but it's kind of more like a one and done sort of quasi LARPing event for them to sell their product. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. And it's pretty canned. It's not like they're coming out and really running 21 days of selection. For instance, there was one recently with Austin Alexander. It's a decent clip, but he comes out and tries selection, right? It's like 4 days. They do the obstacle course, a couple events, but the reality is Special Force assessment selection, like half of a day of it's the obstacle course, which is one of the longest obstacle courses in the military, and it sucks. But that's just like such a small part of what you do, and they're like, oh, this is so hard, and it's just this canned thing, which is cool. And I'm not trying to say oh, don't come to the SFAS because it's difficult, but it is a soul crusher for a reason. We want to see what a true person's character is. And when you see all these influencers doing these events, you just got to know that, yeah, they're probably doing some of it, and what they're doing probably does suck, but it's in no way, shape, or form the full event, no matter what they're doing, and their goal is to entertain their viewers. And our goal is to use them to get to their viewers to possibly, provide some impetus to join the military.
So a solid recruitment tool. So then let me ask you this, and this will be the kind of the bow on the overall thing. There's a lot of guys your age, around our age, starting to come out, coming out has a different connotation, which is also fine, but they're starting to get out and they're putting themselves into this social media space, whether it's tactical training with firearms, which is kind of everybody and their brother is hanging a shingle on that. But there's a couple of groups, and I'm going to actually call one out specifically just because I'm curious. If you're not comfortable talking about them specifically, but just in generalities, that's fine. But there's a couple of groups that seem to be taking kind of the reverse approach, and what you have done in SF and training and everything for the last 20 plus years, and then selling that to the civilian base. And one of those groups is Green Beret Fitness. And they've gotten a lot of traction online lately with some of their events that they do, these kind of 2-day, 3-day orienteering /fitness /shooting courses, but then also just straight fitness stuff. And a lot of it, and there's a couple of guys, I can't remember the name all of a sudden off the top of my head, but they're former British SAS, and they're doing a very similar thing as that. And they're taking essentially what you guys have done and learned in, big Army and then all the way down to SF with the training and the protocols, and then selling that to civilians, or which could be law enforcement or whatever, but generally non-military personnel as training programs and things. What's kind of your experience, or at least take on that, seeing some of the guys that, presumptively you may or may not have used to work with, taking what you've done and learned into the civilian world?
Well, somebody told me a long time ago, they said, hey, look, Chuck, when you get out, there's selling out, and then there's cashing in. He's like, you're allowed to cash in, and you're like, you should, if you spent this much time learning all this stuff, you should be able to cash in. And there's a fine line there. I'm not sure exactly what that line is, but I'm sure when I'm not going to say names, but I could tell you right off the bat, like, okay, this person's selling out, this person's selling out. Like if you're selling any type of secret to success, and you're trying to say, hey, this is the quick fix, you're full of crap. You're full of shit. Like that's not a real thing. So I don't know about Green Beret Fitness. I've never really heard of them, and I don't really pay attention to most of these people getting out of me, but I can tell you, as I'm getting out, I'm going to try to use what I've learned in my career and everything that I wish I would have known when I was 20 years old and provide that. But I'm also not trying to make a killing off it. I want to make enough money so it sustains the program that we're building, and that we can take some money and donate to charity, and I can maybe take a small paycheck off that, but I'm going to have like a real job. But really, it's just there to be this means to educate people. And I'm not going to be doing shooting and stuff like that. It's more like, okay, what are all the things that I learned that if I was in my 20s and I knew this could help me be my best self, or help me to achieve that excellence, that concept of arete, moving towards the best version of me, like, hey, being humble, like there's a difference in being cocky and confident. Like you should be confident, but when it gets into hubris and you come over the line of being a cocky prick, that's when and we've all run into that, right? We constantly struggle. So that's my long answer. It's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it as long as you're not providing a grift. I think that's always, pretty shitty. If it's a straight up grift, if you're saying this is a secret or this will get you this, you're lying, man. And the only secret to success is, one, just being a good person, being a motherfucker worth being around, and two, like hard work that involves consistency, dedication, and some kind of planned programming, like we talked about earlier in the episode, where have some goals, like make sure it's feasibly progressive. Use periodization, stuff like that. If that's what you're teaching people, whether it's with shooting, with physical fitness, or with life, awesome. But if you're going to get out and you're just like, well, I'm going to sell out, and I'm going to run these bullshit courses to get money off people, which we see, right? I'm sure. I mean, I personally know people that have gotten out and done that, and I don't really talk to them anymore. But so I think it's that balance, and what's a grift and what's not. You can tell what a grift is. The civilians probably can tell, like, oh, man, this is cool. Like, this dude did one combat deployment. He knows every lesson of leadership there ever was to learn. I've done 12 combat deployments, 17 deployments total. I am nowhere near an expert on leadership or combat, right? That's not a real thing. So people are trying to sell you that they have all this special stuff that's just badass. Like it's
snake oil, not. Chuck. Snake oil that we talk about, man. That's all it is. I see it all the time too, even on the law enforcement side, man. And you're right, man. The difference between sellout and actually giving knowledge back. I see a lot of these, SWAT boys, we'll call them, they get out and they start all these high speed companies and shit like that. And you could totally tell they're like selling out, not not providing the right guidance for like the young cops, young military, the young guys, because, we have mileage, right? And we have what we learned, the good, the bad, the good, the bad, the ugly. And, that's what we try to bring back to the community. Like, hey, listen, when I was dumb and 20 years old, I freaking dislocated, I tore my shoulder and I kept going. Like, I should have done more PT, or I should have done this or that, or even the physiological shit, what happens to you under stress, right? Even learning that shit now, I wish I knew it when I was 20, brand new in the Army, and then becoming a cop and never really learning any of that shit till I hit my 40s, So it's, it's 100% that. I 100% agree with you, Chuck.
Yeah, if you're like, oh man, these guys are really trying to sell the basics, right? Like basic principles and concepts and things that I didn't like. By all means, it's probably legitimate. But if it's, hey, we're gonna teach you how to be this excellent shooter or excellent physical fitness in this very truncated amount of time, it's BS. Like the only way to greatness and success is through a lot of hard work and dedication, regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah, man, it 100% is. And once again, Chuck, just truly humbled and amazed, every time you come on here, and the amount of knowledge. And you may say you're not an expert in a lot of things, but man, just the experience that you've had in life and through your deployments and, Green Berets and everything, even just overall life. It's something that all these young guys, including myself, I'm not young at all, but young guys that really need to listen to and really take heed in some of your words.
Hey, I want to leave you one last thing, because I got this thing up actually in front of me. It's this for our business that we're starting up. It's stuff that we're going to stay away from, right? I'm going to read this real quick. Yeah. 1, selling secrets in general. Like, we don't have any secrets, right? Selling the secret to success or the secret to great leadership. We're staying away from flashy, materialistic, and unauthentic things, right? No weird, tight T-shirt bullshit. That's what it says on there. Like stuff like that. Like, we're gonna stay away from low quality anything, right? Anything that can be considered a grift or anything, or doing anything just to make money, right? Staying away from all that kind of stuff. Staying away from any endorsements that would violate the grift or authenticity rule, right? It's got to be authentic. Like, hey, let's not advocate for products not aligned with our goals and end states and stuff like that. So anyway, anything that's not like that authentic and just really providing actual knowledge. And then people like, hey, don't take what we're saying. Like, here's some other things that you can look into and get your own opinion on this. But this is coming from our perspective. Here's some other perspectives for you, and moving on from there. So, yeah.
That's fantastic, Chuck. I mean, once that's up and running and you're, out and full speed ahead, I mean, I just think that you're going to have people beating down the door, I mean, you come out of the same school that we all kind of ascribe to, and that same kind of mold is like, like Kyle does. And it's like, that speaks to a lot of people. We're just not the loud vocal majority, but, we're out there. And I think that the larger volume of people think more like that and appreciate that. And I'm just glad that you're going to be able to do that, because, what you've got in between the ears and experience and the team that's around you is just something that you can't put a value statement on, and you can't replicate. And it's going to, it's going to legitimately, it's going to save lives, because we're going to have people in our ecosystem that listen, learn, and act upon that are going to be better at their job. And, they're going to be able to go home, at night. And it's going to be in large part because of your contributions and willingness to share that knowledge. And on behalf of Iman and everybody else that is in our world, we cannot thank you enough for being here. And I definitely can't thank you enough for unfucking my technical glitch and letting me jump back on here. And, hey, as Iman always says, hang out for a quick second. We'll get through the outro here, and we'll catch up offline here. But yeah, thank you again for jumping in here. And thanks again to all of our supporters making this happen. AAA Police Supply, our law enforcement listeners. Looking for that one-stop shop, head over to AAAPoliceSupply.com and use that code HYBRID10 for 10% off every order you make, as well as our friends at the Havoc Journal, the voice of the veteran community, focusing on current affairs for everybody, not just military, but really, honestly.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, are we still recording?
Damn.
Is that whole thing recording?
Yeah, I kept it recording.
I'm curious if it'll keep it even though you drop. But if it did, that's fucking hilarious, because it shows what kind of fucking numbskulls we are.
Yeah.
If it didn't, basically all I was doing was thanking Kyle Lamb and Viking Tactics for all the gear and equipment that
hey, just start from
Chuck, and I talked a bunch of shit about you.
Just start from Kyle. That way you can edit it on your own.
I hope it's all there because I'm not going to edit it because it just shows everybody that we are just dumb as fuck and pushing buttons.
If you want to add that towards the end, like, hey, yeah, another technical glitch. We're just dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
Just do that. You know what? That'd be funny.
Yeah. All right. Well, and that is the fact that we had another technical glitch, not mine this time. The guy who doesn't have a technical glitch, though, because all of his shit is battle tested and fucking proven, is Kyle Lamb and his company Viking Tactics for the best tactical gear anywhere, from battle belts and slings to everything in between. Kyle's company offers the elite selection of high quality, battle proven, won't fuck up in the field like we just did. Tactical gear guaranteed to be ready and work every fucking single time you needed it when the job calls for it. Check them out at VikingTactics.com. There, how's that?
There we go.
What a shit show.
Oh.
Man, we love you. Thank you for putting up with our fucking stupidity.
Have you seen these blue microphones?
Yes.
Man, they are the perfect shape. They fit right inside of you.
You sound hot as. I mean, you sound sexy. Like I've done a video.
I got it set to the vibration mode. And I've been sitting on this thing.
Oh my god, that is amazing.
Oh my god.